Hello, Light Seller community. Happy to be back with you. Thank you for joining me in the webinar. Really hope that you got a lot of good information out of learning about herbs for the immunity and mushrooms. I got a bunch of questions and I thought it'd be easier to just make a video to share some of those answers. We did run a little overtime, so this is a follow-up video just to kind of answer some of your questions, because really I know that what's most important to you is also most important to me to make sure that that's the type of content you get. So I'm going to just run through. I got about there's about 8 or 9 questions here, and we'll go from the top. So the first question is, how to kill bad gut bacteria and fungus in a very sensitive body while nourishing and healing the GI tract? Now, this is huge. I think this is something that's big. Actually, another question has some similar parts to it. I will say that bacteria and fungus that are in the gut, that are in a bad, creating bad microbiome health, are a product of the ecosystem, right? So what are we feeding our body? The very first thing we want to do is look at our diet. Of course, most people end up eating too much acidic food, too many sweets, too many easy to break down calories and empty calories in some ways. And so that just feeds into a poor ecosystem. So the first thing to look at there is really just to eat whole foods, obviously, more fiber in the diet, more alkaline foods, more things that are going to just nourish at that level. Also to cut down things that are inflaming the gut, right? The gut lining, when it's inflamed, and these are often everything from our preservatives, additives, synthetic chemicals, alcohol, coffee, you name it. These are some of the things, some of our heavy acidic foods like tomatoes and red meat, and those and shellfish might also be pro-inflammatory. So you might want to cut down some of that. Things like onions and garlic and good quality almonds and rice and all of this stuff are fairly good for us. Although I'll say a lot of leafy green vegetables, especially this time of year, you're looking at more of your dark green vegetables like your kale and collards and broccoli and whatever that might be for you. So that's just from a dietary perspective. When it comes to working with our microbiome health, especially bacteria and fungus, because it's an ecosystem balance that we're looking for, we want to do it in that kind of like, I call it the Karate Kid method. And I've mentioned this before in videos where it's like wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. That's cleanse, build, squeezing the sponge in a way, and then filling it up with water, and then squeezing the sponge and filling it up with water. That's how we would clean a dirty sponge. And think of your gut like that. You can also do similar with the liver, right? We want to cleanse, build, cleanse, build. So what are some of those things? So the first one to look at is cleansing. Obviously, when it comes to digestive cleansing, the first is like, are we actually digesting our food? And so this might be a digestive enzyme if we're really not digesting our food properly. If we digest our food properly, we're going to not leave a lot for some of these other microbiological imbalances. And so take a digestive enzyme to begin with if you have really bad digestion, but the idea is to wean off of that and get into more of a digestive tonic tea or a digestive tonic tincture or bitters, right? So your bitter herbs. One of my favorites in this case is meadowsweet. Meadowsweet is really good for supporting upper GI tract stuff. I would also say that apple cider vinegar and honey and lemon is another great one for upper digestive tract stuff. Also, make sure we're not creating a lot of bloat. Things like fennel, peppermint, for inflammation, slippery elm, marshmallow, things like that we might make into a tea. That would be amazing. Other digestives and things that are going to like work on that small intestinal tract and inflammation in that area. Might be along that line of like, I actually like fennel fenugreek. I find that that's a really nice one. A little bit of ginger in there can be really useful. And there's a bunch of herbs like that. You can kind of look up some digestive herbs that way. But then as we go further in, when we get into the lower digestive tract, that's where we get a lot of the big buildup of parasites and bad bacteria and bad fungus infections. So we may want to do in a cleansing process first some digestive herbs or a digestive enzyme, but then we might also want to do a little more heavy hitters. So some of our parasite herbs and some of our candida combat type herbs are recommended there in our cleansing part of our digestive tract. So those are things like golden seal and garlic and Oregon grape. Those are all some big ones. Even oil of oregano in a small amount can be good that way. I don't really love that one because it causes more problems because people overdo the oil of oregano. But then we might get into some of the other kind of things like Podarco. That's another great herb. So we make one called Candida Combat. It's a tincture. You can get it at Light Cellar. It's great, great tincture for digestive kind of clearing of fungus and bacteria. You will see that many of the medicinal mushrooms are also really anti-inflammatory, and some of them have antibacterial properties. So you might look at things like your reishi in that case. You may look at chaga and turkey tail. These are all ones that could be helpful. They're more tonics though, and so they're not for like very specifics. You want to get the heavier hitters like your golden seal. You may also, if it's things like parasites, and even if it's not parasites, things like wormwood are actually good for antibacterial. Sage can be, but you don't want to do too much of these kind of herbs. So we do a parasite purge. That's a great tincture as well. So Candida Combat, Parasite Purge, and Digestive Harmony would be our 3 tinctures I would work with. I would also highly recommend a tea, starting with a digestive tea, but maybe working into something that's going to kind of have some of those anti-pathogenic compounds to them, right? So that's to begin with. I'll say I could go way further into that. It's a pretty deep question, really, when you look at killing bacteria and fungus. The next part about that, though, I want to just remind you is you need to build again, rebuild, right? And I'm not just talking about some weird stool inoculant from a tribe in the like wild crafting bush people. That's actually one way that people do rebuild, but you may do something, and you could get more invasive a little bit in the cleansing of colon hydrotherapy. Something like that might be to just clear it out. But how do we rebuild? So prebiotics are far more important than probiotics. A lot of people don't realize that most of the probiotic supplements you take, they don't actually build good gut bacteria. They just help support, but they don't do the job of colonizing the gut. What really is required is prebiotics, and those are just fibrous foods. Those are things like broccoli and yam and the skins of apples and all of this kind of stuff. The fiber parts are going to rebuild. The medicinal mushrooms are really good for this. So in the cleansing phase, I'm going to just kind of reiterate that I wouldn't actually, I'm going to retract. I wouldn't take the medicinal mushrooms as much in the cleansing. I would want to add them into the building phase more. And then we may also look at building up with good, just vitamin mineral levels and high quality nutrition, yogurts, sauerkrauts, fermented foods that are going to kefirs, things like this that might support that rebuilding, reestablishing of the microbiome. And of course, whole foods. If you're not digesting well, it's good to make a lot more soups and broths. Bone broth is a classic for rebuilding, but so could be a nice strong vegetable broth and a mushroom broth, something along this line. So those are going to be some of the things. So wax on, wax off. 2-week phases are what I like to do. The Wild Rose Herbal Detox is another great one for cleansing to begin with, but then that might be the first one. Then you want to do a building phase and then maybe do another cleanse afterwards where you're looking at some of these other heavy hitters like the Oregon grape and the golden seal, garlic, that kind of stuff. I would also recommend, there's things like colloidal silver and stuff like that you can do on that way. So this is a bigger topic though. Again, I could take another whole hour to talk about it because it's huge, and it's our digestive system is the seat of our health. Most of us have some kind of bad gut ecology issue. So just be aware that this is not, you're not alone, and we're all fighting this based on the foodscape available in the modern world and the lifestyle design that most of us are either subject to or have created for ourselves. Okay, next question I'm going to go to is best herbs and mushrooms to stimulate and heal the vagus nerve. Esophagus has stopped working, and LES won't open properly. So need to reactivate the vagus nerve. Okay, this is a little more specific question. So first thing, nervines, right? Nervines. What are the good nervines here? We are looking at things to stimulate the vagus nerve that are going to stimulate the nervous system in general, right? And so things like passion flower and skullcap come to mind for me. Those are probably some of my top choices. I'd probably be going to that. I would also invite you to look at, actually, you may find things like even just a little bit of like chocolate, ironically enough, could be a good one to help stimulate the vagus nerve. So those are some of the things I might look at. I'd also look at, what's another one that I was thinking of here? Vervains. The blue vervain is another good herb for stimulating the nervous system and the vagus nerve in general. I would also make sure that as you're doing that you're supporting it with circulatory stimulants too. So adding in ginger, even Kava is as much as it's like a muscle relaxant, it's going to stimulate the area, right? So those might be some options there. But yeah, a nervine, we do a tincture called Feel Calm. It does have valerian in it, so it can be drowsy for some people, but it's got a lot of these nervous system supportive herbs. I would also then look at some of the ones that are more nourishing, like milky oats. This is a great herb for supporting the vagus nerve and the nervous system in general. So yeah, those are a couple of ideas around that. Let's see, next question. All right, best herbs and mushrooms for cleansing the liver and lymphatic, plus killing fungus bacteria in the gut while healing the GI tract lining. Okay, so I did talk about GI tract and gut, so refer to question 1, but really let's look at herbs and mushrooms for cleansing the liver and the lymphatics. So as you know, the lymphatics, it requires movement. So the best thing you can do is actually just physically move the body. I often like to do tapping as well. Swimming will help move all of the lymphatic system. Brushing, so you can do like skin brushing, trampolining. These are all some ideas. Even bike riding, the jitter and the jiggle of the muscles, or skiing, the muscles, the movement will clear that to a degree, right? So that's one of the things, is just look at that. Some of the herbs there, depending on the potency required, probably the most classically used one is cleavers. But you may also find that just even some of the circulatory stimulating herbs that are going to move circulation around, like ginger and cayenne and these kind of things, they work with circulation, but they're also going to help stimulate the nervous system to a degree, or the lymphatic system. Some people use stuff like poke root. If there's a real lymphatic congestion, they will use an external poke root salve. But I find even just moving that, one of the things I've found to be really good for lymphatic congestion up in the head is actually something called ear candling. Ear candling, you stick a fire rod, basically a wax candle in the ear with a that's hollow, and people think it's pulling out earwax. It has nothing to do with pulling out earwax, guys. I want to kind of break that myth. The wax you see when you open up the candle is not earwax. What it usually is wax residue from the candle. There might be a little bit of earwax that get pulled out, okay. But the reality is people have been doing ear candling for centuries, and it's not just wax candles. You could take a piece of newspaper. Now, I don't recommend this, but it's been done where a piece of newspaper and even herbs packed inside as a cone is used and burned. And the idea is that the fire creates a negative vacuum loop that sucks out from the ears. There is a lot of fluid in the head, in the lymphatic system, also in the sinuses and congestion. This has also been done with papyrus grass in Egypt. This was done in Mexico. This was done all over the world. Forms of hollow tubes burnt to be able to pull out and move stagnation. So this is something, if you get a lot of lymphatic congestion, even for a cold, I've seen people use this to move out stuffy nasal cavity, headaches, lymphatic drainage that way. So that's another option. There are some reputable ear candles out there. Have a friend, be careful. It is burning near your head. Have a towel and a bowl of water and follow the instructions. But yeah, that's a really good therapy that is not talked about a lot anymore, and I think is just one of the best. And if you've done ear candling before, you know how opening it can feel. And just to break that myth one more time, it's not just about earwax, okay? All right, there's a lot of fluids, and it really helps move all that. Even helps you think better. Okay, next question is, can you use Ooznia topically? Of course you can. Actually, it's one of my favorites for a topical wound care. It's super antibacterial. You would make it into a powder. So dry it out, powder it up either in a blender or a coffee grinder or mortar and pestle. You really can't do a great powder with Ooznia in a mortar and pestle, but you can try. And then put it in a little, like, I guess we don't have film containers anymore, but a little vial, and you can put it on an open wound. It's also for, like, if there's a bacterial infection or bacterial related like psoriasis or something, you can put it on that. So it's great that way. Some people make an Ooznia salve. I don't find that to be as useful as really just the straight up dried powdered Ooznia. So yeah, topically, no problem. I think it's actually very useful that way. And so any kind of bacterial infection, even a bit of fungal infection, is antifungal. So it could go into your socks with a foot infection or a fungus infection, that is. Okay. Next one is, how much mushrooms do you add to a broth? Ooh, it depends on the mushrooms, and it depends on you. I find mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms we're talking about, they all have different flavors and different personalities. So reishi, you can add one slice and it can to a cup, and it's like, whoa, that's pretty bitter. So you might want to add a slice or two of reishi to a good like 4-liter pot, maybe 3 slices of reishi at the most. But typically the idea is 1 teaspoon per teacup, and a teacup is about 250 mils. So if you're making a gallon, or let's just say 4 liters, that is 4 times 8, or 4 times 4 times teaspoons. So that's 16 teaspoons is a max out that I would dose at a 4 liter, sorry, pot of soup. That might be a little bit heavy. My idea for making broths is to start with twice as much water and reduce it down. That'll really get you a potent broth. And if you're adding things like turkey tail, they're pretty gentle. Chaga is fairly gentle, but you can overdo it. You don't want to boil the chaga because then it does go bad, and it does denature some of the antioxidants and stuff like that in it. Plus also working with the inner core of a mushroom, the conky part is going to be more of your polysaccharides. The outer layer is going to have more of your terpene profiles or other strong chemistry, like in the chaga case, the betulinic acid. Okay, so roundabout way of saying a dash of mushrooms, a dibble of mushrooms, not this much mushrooms to your pot of soup. But if you're hardcore, you may want to go more. I highly recommend you get more intuitive. And with questions like this, you ask yourself this, try it with a high dose and be like, is this too strong? We've made some crazy strong mushroom broths and then had soup that we couldn't eat, and we had to feed to the chickens or the dog. And even the dog would be like, oh, that's like too bitter, too much reishi and red belted polypore and weird stuff in there. So I've definitely screwed this up. I will say that. And that's how you learn. I want to recommend that trust your gut with some of these like amounts decisions. And if it's too high, you'll know for next time. Like, it's not until you fail you actually learn something properly, right? Okay. I heard a saying once, and this is total sidebar, but that our life is hung between the tragedies in which we experience. And those are the fence posts of our life. And I just thought this was cool because I'm like, yeah, it's the hard times, the challenging things, the stuff, the funk, the bad ideas, those are the things we learn from, and those are the things we remember. So you'll remember if you had too much mushrooms to your mushroom broth. Okay. Next question is, how can you ground earth in the winter when the earth is frozen? Well, take those feet out and suffer in the cold. Well, not suffer, but breathing. You probably heard of the Iceman and his whole process. I would say that you can't always like put your bare feet into snow for a long period of time. I've done that and like almost frozen my feet off. I've run through the snow in bare feet, and like it's been traumatic at times. I will say that. Your breath, grounding through your body, through a little bit of like opening up. Take time, just shavasana outside, slow movement, move slowly. I do something called fox walking, which is going from toe to heel. And it's this process is a process of touching to the earth, feeling it with my feet instead of using my eyes to observe it, and rolling back to my heels. This is grounding in itself. If you can wear moccasins, great. You can get closer to the earth. I do believe in like earthing and literally putting your feet directly in contact with the earth. This actually increases a lot of free electrons that can help ground the body. But the concept of grounding is more than just like the physical grounding to the earth. It's about taking time out of your busy life to reconnect and build a relationship with the earth, right? So grounding can come in many ways, and it can just be moving slowly outside. I find we move too fast, most of us, and even me, like I'm talking too fast right now, but a grounding practice would be to just slow down. Big, deep breaths, move. Toe to heel, wide angles, slow down, get to the peripheral. Don't look straight ahead. Just feel into the ethos of the environment you're in. Surround yourself by trees, whether they're needles or even in a forest that is deciduous and has lost its leaves in the winter. Get out and breathe that air, that crisp air. Feel it with intention into your lungs. So these are some practices that I think are really useful for grounding. Okay. Next question. Can you give more examples of lifestyle modifications and herbs to build for the lunar cycle? And the question of cleansing for the lunar cycle too. So I did sort of just touch on that at the very beginning. I will say that in the building cycle, just to reiterate what I mentioned, is things like your fermented foods, even some good quality dairy, if it's grass-fed butter or yogurts or kefirs. But I'd also be building nutrition, right? The root vegetables are building. Think of the starchy foods, but then also have fiber to them, right? Those are building foods, right? Whereas spring greens are cleansing. Lettuces are cleansing, right? Cleansing that. You may also find just nourishing oatmeal and the way I like to do oatmeal, and this is our like building oatmeal or I call it super tonic oatmeal. It's steel cut oats that hopefully if you can do it, you soak them the night before and then cook them. This is just a better way of like opening up the oats. But if not, if you're like on the go and you got to do quick oats, that's fine. But oatmeal of some form, best quality you can, and then add sauerkraut and nutritional yeast and soy sauce and some kind of hemp oil or grass-fed butter to finish it all off. This is almost an umami savory oats. And the fermented plus the nutritional yeast that is building and adding more B vitamins and minerals to your diet and to get that absorption in. And the oats are calming down to the nervous system and relaxing the digestive tract. All of this is just like this really super tonic digestive builder, right? And support. The other things I would do in that building phase is I would start to add in other supplements, right? In cleansing, I would take out all of my omega essential fatty acids, any kind of multivitamin or other types of supplements you might do if you're doing minerals and vitamins and those things. I'm not a huge fan of those. I like whole foods, but that doesn't mean in the winter I don't take some vitamin D. I do, because I am not in Mexico. I'm in this dark, deep cave, like you can see here, and it's dark and cloudy out here on the West Coast. So I'm taking some vitamin D, but I am trying to get up the mountain if I can. I would like to go to Mexico, but I'm not going to do that this year at all. That's fine. I'll get the vitamin D through liquid drops if I need to, as well as I'll get outside and do that. But don't add any of that into your cleansing protocol. That's all building stuff, right? Zinc, vitamin C, all of those, they're high builders. As far as herbs, digestive builders, digestive tonics, right? Adaptogens, all your adaptogens are building herbs. They're supportive that way, right? So if you're doing like one of these crazy adaptogen elixir type things from the light cellar, or, you're working with that kind of tonic herbalism, the eleutheros, the ginsengs, the ashwagandhas, the holy basils, the, whatever it is you're working with, the superpowered ant, whatever you like, the pine pollen, all that is building. Whereas when it comes to cleansing, it's the clearing stuff, the things that are good for the liver. The milk thistle is more building of the liver, but the dandelion and burdock are more cleansing of the liver, right? Artichoke, cleansing of the liver. All these kind of cleansing herbs might be some of the laxative herbs too, like Cascara sagrada. Or I'm not a fan of senna, but I do think like turkey rhubarb and yellow dock and things like this might be other alternatives. So those are cleansing ones. Whereas like spirulina, another building one, right? So look at it that way. Wax wane. It's intuitive as well. Anything diuretic for the kidneys is cleansing, right? Your juniper, your uva ursi, your corn silk, the cleavers that are good for the lymphatic, they're cleansing, right? For the blood, your red clover blossoms, and things like that. So anyway, I've listed a bunch of herbs. Don't go out and buy them all. This is the other thing that's so important to me, is that you don't go out and just build this massive shrine to guilt by having too many supplements. Work with just a few at a time. I recommend doing like 6 to 7 at the most different types of supplementations that you're taking, and you work through the whole batch until you get more. That way you have a shrine to health, not a shrine to, oh my God, I just broke the bank because I maxed my Visa card on supplements. And then you don't remember what it all does. Okay. So that's just another piece separate from any of the questions. Last question that I've got here. I was given a huge chunk of chaga and made tea from it, and I got a bad headache. I'm guessing it was too highly concentrated. What are your thoughts? Yeah, chaga is not for everybody. And depending on the, I don't know, because given a huge chunk of chaga may mean given it might have gone moldy. They're like, it doesn't really mold, but maybe it doesn't dry properly. Maybe it has a secondary fungus on it. So that's maybe a thing. Whereas when you buy chaga, hopefully it's been processed and maybe has an SOP or not SOP, a C of A that comes with it to analyze it properly. And if not, just like looking at making sure there's not, because you can get things like Staphylococcus and E. coli and other secondary bacteria and fermentation on some of these things. So that's one thing. The other thing is the outer black part is all those terpenes. So my recommendation for this person is if you got a big chunk of chaga, cut it in half, scoop it or chunk out with a hatchet or a long-handed chisel or something, and then break it up with a hammer, all the orange corky bit, and make a tea with the corky bit, and then make a separate tea with the blackish parts and taste the difference. It's most likely the blackish parts with all the terpenes in it that is really strong and may give more of the potential of a headache in that sense. This isn't common for most people. I drink lots of chaga tea, don't get a headache from it. And lots of people do, but I have heard this before. So you're not alone in that sense. It could be too strong, or it could be secondary bacterial, or it could be the black part on the outer part that is almost giving an adverse reaction from all the terpenes and the betulinic acid in it. Okay, thanks for joining me for the questions. Hope you got a little bit out of this. And as always, much love. You are in good hands if you're working with the Light Cellar community. I just want to they're just a beacon of good energy here in the universe, especially in Calgary, Alberta. Go in and share some love with them. They're working hard, trying to deal with the whole mandates of the world. So be easy on them and give them love. Okay, thanks for joining me. Yarrow Willard signing out. If you want to find out more for what I do, I work with Wild Rose College. We create some of the best online content for learning about herbal medicine. And just a quick sneak peek, I'm about to launch a herbal pharmacy class that is awesome. If you want to go deep into mushrooms, we have an online mushroom course that is amazing at Wild Rose College. And as always, give some love to the Harmonic Arts products. Check out some of the different tinctures we do, some of the teas, the medicinal mushrooms we have are of the top quality with all of the terpene profiles and all of the polyphenols and measured amounts of cordycepine and andozine in the cordyceps and all that good stuff. So check out the Harmonic Arts products. Check out some of my YouTube videos and give the Light Cellar some love. Okay, Yarrow signing out. Live long and prospore, my friends. Brew.